Hey, everybody. I'm Jesse.
This is Doug.
And this is Jake.
And this is Boring Conversation.
Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
And welcome back to Boring Conversation, everybody. I have myself, Doug, and Jake. Doug of Danger Planet fame, Jake of Nastygram RPG and Boring Conversation fame, and we're here to talk about CaptainCon. Are we not, gentlemen?
We are. We're so famous, huh?
I guess.
I mean, we have microphones, so
We do have microphones, so basically the internet.
In that we have microphones and access to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I saw a meme.
Are we supposed to go? Yeah, I saw that meme that you posted.
You saw the meme, yeah. I saw a meme recently that basically said that podcasts are just guys mansplaining to each other, and I was touched deeply by that.
When you sent that to our like group chat, Jesse, I was in a meeting and I laughed out loud during the meeting, and it was it was
a little uncomfortable, but yeah, pretty funny.
It was funny. No, that was a good one. Yeah, that was a good one.
So let's mansplain to each other about Malifaux, shall we not?
I love it.
Yes. So the tack of the episode today is basically going to be recapping our experiences at CaptainCon, specifically the MCCI. All three of us played in the MCCI, so we're basically going to just walk through our games, share some of our experiences. Towards the end, we're going to recap some of our thoughts if we did end up playing, using or playing against any Madness of Malifaux models. And we'll leave the other, booty and plunder recaps to some other channels. Looking forward to hearing what everybody had to say about the events. But before we get into talking about the MCCI, most importantly, what are you gentlemen drinking tonight? Doug, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, wait, hold on. It's in the fridge. Man.
It's in the fridge.
Wait,
okay.
No, everybody, internet, hold on 1 second, internet. I have
this. Jake's going to go ahead while Doug gets his, and then I'm going to read mine, and hopefully Doug's back by the time we're done. So
no,
Jake,
I'm back. I have it.
Okay. I am drinking a red blend tonight from Apothic.
Mm. Mm-hmm. I like Apothic. Unsurprisingly, I like wine, too.
Going for... Been trying to cut back on the beer. Too many carbs, so... Every once in a while, you got to switch to wine.
Yeah, hell yeah. I myself have a Belleflower Brewing Finch and Thistle India Pale Ale. It is a 6.8% ABV. And I'm not going to go through all of the ingredients because nobody cares except for me or anybody at Homebrews. But I do appreciate the fact that this brewery actually put all of the grains and the hops and the yeast that they use on the can, which is pretty cool for homebrewers like me. Now, I actually cracked this about 30 minutes ago, so I've got maybe like one swig left in my glass. So I actually have on deck a second drink. Love second drinks. This is a Makku, what do you call it? Coffee Makgeoli, which I'm very excited about. It just came in the mail today. I ordered 2 cases of mixed different flavors of this stuff. Makgeoli is pretty cool because it's actually Korean rice beer, which is basically like Korean soju, which is their equivalent of sake, but like beer strength, like 5 to 6%. And with a little bit more
soju?
Body. It's like soju, except it's more of a beer and less of a wine.
Isn't that the name of your new enforcer?
That's shoujo.
Soju, okay.
Which is a Japanese liquor.
But
spirit.
She is made of booze.
Right.
So she is a booze genie. So
on air right now, I'm going to take my last swig of this beer. And then I'm going to crack this Makgeoli and probably have it spill all over my keyboard. It did not spill on my keyboard. Douglas, why don't you tell us what we have?
I have just opened a Fuji apple and white tea spiked seltzer.
How fancy.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. It's either going to be
I've never
really
had a
good or
spiked
totally
seltzer that I
disgusting.
liked, so I salute you.
They
So
taste like, I think to me, the best way to describe most spiked seltzers is like you're in a room and somebody is yelling TV static at you from like 15 feet away, and you just sometimes get a little dizzy if you drink too much. That's
That's
kind of
pretty
how I
funny.
feel like it tastes.
It really does taste like TV static, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Oh my god. I just had a sip of this Makgeoli, and I am extremely happy that I got a whole case of the coffee flavor, because this is outstanding.
In
All right.
in my undergrad, one quick quip, and then I'll allow us to move to productivity. Allen's Coffee Brandy was the staple of Maine, so spiked up morning brandy beverages was amazing. So I spent 4 years drinking a lot of coffee flavored liquor. That's all I'm
Nice.
saying.
all right, let's get drunk and complain about Damien. Go.
Yes. So we're just going to start right from round one. Before we do, just in case anybody missed it, basically the way that the MCCI worked was it was the Malifaux Content Creators Invitational. We had 10 teams of 2 players apiece, so 20 total players that participated. The way that the rounds worked and the pairing process worked is each team would get paired into another team at a set of 2 tables. The tables were just labeled A and B. Whichever team was on top would nominate one of their... let me back up a little bit. All the players would reveal their masters at the same time. Once the masters were revealed, the team that was on top would choose one of their masters and put it onto one of the tables. The opposing team would then take one of their masters and pair it into that master, and then the remaining 2 masters that hadn't been chosen would get put onto the other table. The tables had a shared scheme pool, but they had different deployments and strategies on each table. So basically, it gave the team in the lead the ability to choose which master they wanted to have in a specific pool. But then it gave the team that was tailing a little bit the opportunity to set the matchup and, by extension, choose whichever master they wanted on the second table. So a little bit of an advantage for both teams, rather. That said, we're going to just dive right into round one, and I'll just go ahead and go first. Since, I don't know, I didn't tell either of these guys that they should be expecting to go first. So, round one, we had Team Boring Conversation, myself and Jacob, paired up against Malifaux Musings with Adam Rogers and John Goldborn. My game, I ended up into Adam Rogers. We were both playing Thunders for the day. I ended up taking... this encounter was standard deployment, cursed objects. I ended up taking In Your Face and Hidden Martyrs. Adam took In Your Face and Sabotage. I took Misaki 1, and Adam took Yoko 2. So this was a pretty cool game. It was a pretty... I think we both played pretty on the rails lists. I kind of stuck to my standard, like, Misaki 1 with the totem. I always take a Toto. This particular game, I ended up taking a Woku Raider with Silent Protector, which is something that I take pretty often. And I have probably a 70% hit rate with it. 30% of the games it just kind of dies, but the other, 70% it does pretty dang well. A lot of times better than most of my opponents expect. I took the requisite Jin Bakara. I also took a Thunder Archer, a Torakage, and I believe I took a Shadow Effigy as well.
So Jesse, can I ask you something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So over the course of the 3 games we played, I sort of defaulted to you on who should be on which match and against which other master, because I've kind of been out of Malifaux for a while and just jumping back into it. Didn't feel super confident about making those decisions. But is there a reason that you thought that you should go up against Yoko and I should go up against Shenlong?
I think part of it was that I knew that Misaki is quite good into cursed objects. She's probably one of the better crews for it in Thunders. They were the team in the lead, so I believe, as I recall, that they put Yoko into the cursed objects pool. So that left John Goldborn with Shenlong into the corner covert op pool. like, Misaki can do covert ops pretty well because she's got a lot of 2-inch engages, but I just felt really confident that I was probably going to be able to deal with most of the armor and the other tech pieces that Yoko took. And I was pretty sure that you were going to be able to handle the Shenlong game, especially because you had declared Von Stuck, and I felt like Von Stuck has enough hard to wound that it would help mitigate some of the irreducible damage that Shenlong can do to punch through some of the armor that you have in your crew. So I was just feeling pretty confident that you'd be able to at least tie or potentially win that game.
I think we had played a practice game of
yes.
What did we play? Misaki and Von Stuck.
I think I played Yoko.
Yoko, yeah,
I played Yoko
and Von Stuck. We played in that pool to try it out.
Yeah, and I mean it worked out. I mean, I think that the Stuck 2 crew just has enough speed and mobility that you should be able to do corner covert without too much difficulty.
You didn't think it wasn't really the masters. You didn't really think like one of us was going to do way better against one of those masters. It was kind of
I felt like either of us could handle the opposing player's master without much difficulty, especially where he was playing Yoko and you'd played against my Yoko a few times, so you kind of knew what the crew did. But it was more looking at the encounters. Yeah. So that said, my game went pretty well. I did have a little bit of trouble because Adam did a really good job of holding his Fuhatsu activation until later in the turn, and he actually took Kitty Dumont out of keyword, which I know is a very common take for a Yoko 2 crew, but it's not something that I use that often. So between Yoko and Kitty Dumont, he was able to get, I think, focus 2 on Fuhatsu and get it, significantly far up his side of the board before it activated. So I kind of had to play my entire turn 1 around not getting shot. Thankfully, there was a little building kind of right in the middle, like a small building right in the middle of the table that I was able to screen like 2 or 3 models behind. So I didn't really have to worry about getting punched too hard turn 1. Eventually what ended up happening was I was able to get his Hinamatsu kind of deep into my side of the table because he went pretty deep, and then I was able to kind of pigpile on it. And once Hinamatsu died, it was just kind of a matter of sort of trying to pick off 1 or 2 of his other models here and there as I could. Yeah, I mean, it went pretty well. I thought I was going to lose the Woku at one point because he went into it pretty hard, but I managed to get quite a few heals off on it, and that was my second Martyr's target, so I had to have it alive at the end of the game so that I could engage either Bill or Yoko and get my second point, and Yoko's the one that I ended up getting it on. So overall, pretty good game. It was a nice sort of back and forth. The score was very swingy. It ended up 8-3 in my favor, but I mean, realistically, there were a couple of turns that it could have easily swung a few more points in Adam's favor, and it would have made for a very tight game. We had a lot of pretty wild jokers that game. But yeah, this is a good game. Good game overall. Good way to shake off some of the rust at the start of the event. What about you, Jake?
Yeah. So this is a good opportunity to talk about the rules change you made. Because I played against Shenlong 1, and this was the altered well, you want to talk a little bit about the call you made?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, I mean, I know a lot of people are probably in the know about it, but basically I made a house rule that said Koji, the new 10 Thunder starter box henchman, long story short, he has a ranged attack called Taker's Bane. It's a gun. And it's like a 2/3/4 damage track, and then as a part of the base ability, it can also drop an enemy scheme marker within 3 inches of the target. But that enemy scheme marker drop is not enemy locked. You can do it when you're attacking friendly models. And he also has a aura called Protection Money, which is shared by a few other models in 10 Thunders. I think it's the only faction that actually has it. But basically, you can take, especially in a Shenlong crew, you can take Koji as like a versatile hire, and then you can hire 1 or 2 Lotus Eaters, which also have protection money. So you can make it so all the auras overlap, you shoot one of your models with Koji turn 1, it drops a scheme marker within all 3 auras, triggering all 3 of them so that you draw 3 cards. And then you can just do it again with the second AP, so you draw another 3 cards. Typically speaking, you're shooting a target that has armor, because you're probably hiring in like a lone swordsman or a Fuhatsu or something like that, so you're actually only dealing 2 damage total. And then Shenlong has a style upgrade called Wandering River Style, and the attack action that it gives is basically you target a model. There's no TN, and you can just relent it. But what it's going to do is it's going to push that model up to 6 inches, and it picks up any up to 3 markers within aura, 2 or something like that, 2 or 3 of the model, and then they get dropped. And the important thing is that it says dropped, like with a capital D, near that model when it finishes the push. So if you have 2 scheme markers, or potentially 3 in later turns, near one of these models that you 4 winds punch, it picks up all 2 or 3 of them, and then drops all 2 or 3 of them within range of it when it finishes the move, which potentially triggers the protection money again, and then you draw like 6 cards. And then you can just take the action again if you need to.
He's got another model that just drops an enemy scheme marker at the start of the game, though.
Exactly.
What's that?
So that's called the Amai. Essentially what I did was I errated Taker's Bane on Koji so that it wouldn't drop an enemy scheme marker unless you were targeting an enemy model. That way you couldn't just sit in your deployment zone and, take this one model and then draw 6 cards for an AP, like multiple times a turn. So,
but you can do that with the Amai, though.
You can still do it with the Amai, but it requires you to pay an additional 5 stones per Amai. So you end up sinking a lot of stones into making this combo work. So, like, if you hire 2 Amai so that you get 2 enemy scheme markers anywhere on the board during the start phase of turn 1, like, yeah, you can put them in your deployment zone, but because it's start phase, it doesn't trigger the draw. Well,
so,
it might, but it doesn't matter. But basically, you're spending 6 stones per Lotus Eater, plus potentially taking Koji, plus you're taking 1 to 2 Amai. So that's like more than half of your crew at that point.
Right. So he had 2 Amai and he had 2 Lotus Eaters, so that was 28 points. And then basically as soon as Shenlong does his punch thing, he's drawing 4 cards, I think. So John has obviously practiced it because he was pretty quick with his activations, but he had a ton of models and he was drawing probably 12 cards a turn. It got to the point where he would have 6 cards in his hand and he would draw 6 more, and then he would be discarding face cards. Yeah. And I think it helped him a lot that because I'm playing Von Stuck, one of Von Stuck's main mechanics is that he needs to get his scheme markers near the enemy so that he can treat them as living or beast or construct or undead. So there's a few attacks in his crew that actually drop a scheme marker at range. And they're usually like some sort of like, attack around it, but then he does his attack, which requires them to be a whatever beast or undead or whatever you need. So I realized pretty quickly that any offensive action I took was going to actually be helping him draw cards, but because he had already, if he was really familiar with my crew, he could have not taken those Amai because he would have known, like, I'm going to give him all the scheme markers he wants. But it just got to the point where he was drawing so many cards that dropping another scheme marker kind of was irrelevant. I was like, does it matter if you're drawing 8 or 12? Like, I don't really think it does. So that was a little challenging because the only things I was ever able to get off were if he flipped a black joker or if I was holding a red joker in hand. And even then it's really hard because most of his crew can spend a chi to raise their stat by 2, and most of their stats are 5, so it's usually going to a 7. But that means that he's beating my red jokers, like if I'm stat 5 or whatever. So there was it was really hard to get anything through. But like you said, it cost him half of his crew. So it really like, and he was not very aggressive with them. And part of that I think was because most of his crew was just generating chi and cards. But like I realized after the game that he didn't attack me once. He never made an attack on me. In fact, I took 1 damage on one model, and it was just because I charged into like an aura where I took a damage if I charged. So it was weird.
Jake, I think a really interesting point to be made here, based on your experience, is that oftentimes Rube Goldberg machines, which is kind of how I categorize this,
100%.
they can be crazy overtuned, and it can spit out like a nuclear death. It can spit out a nuclear death bomb, or if they're not tuned correctly, you still need to invest a ton of AP and a ton of model activations in the same machine, and then when it spits out something a lot less impressive, it can actually just be kind of bad, which I think is interesting because on balance, you're paying, and you guys kind of both touched on this point, you're paying quite a lot, and you're hiring quite a lot of admittedly pretty bad models other than this particular interaction. So if this interaction was brought in line, which I think we kind of all agree it will be at some point, then the list itself is just underpowered. I would categorize it as.
Yeah. I mean, basically. Oh, go ahead, Jake.
I was just gonna say, like, the alteration you made makes sense because looking at it, it's like if he could have just take that one guy instead of those 2 minions that really didn't do anything else in the game, then I mean that's like a lot of stones. That's the difference of bringing one big beater that can really utilize those cards to just ruin my crew.
Yeah. And kind of the best iteration of that crew that I came up with was taking Koji, which is like Koji does the trick turn 1 and then also is just a good model that does other things throughout the course of the game, and then just hiring 1 Lotus Eater. So basically you're hiring 1 8-stone model that draws you a ton of cards and just does other good stuff, and you're hiring a 6-stone model that isn't really that great, but is enabling you to draw a lot more cards. So then every time you do this interaction, you're drawing 4 cards instead of 6.
The other thing I'll say about lists like that in general, I mean, like they're very fun to like do when you're at home, sitting on your couch looking at the app. But like when you get to the table and you start doing those, like they're like they're not that fun, and they're definitely not fun for your opponent, who's really just sitting there waiting for you to finish your Malifaux masturbation. Because and they also, I mean, we've talked so much about speed of play and finishing games, and John was super practiced with that. And I was playing my turn super fast because I had to, because he had like a dozen models, and I mean, he was not trying to slow play me, but we got to turn 3 and it was 100% because of the crew he was playing, and I knew that was going to happen because I'm just looking at how many models he has and how many cards he has to like draw and discard, and even if you're super fast, and he was super fast and very practiced with it, even if you are at that point, at that level, it's just making for a really slow game. It's the reason I don't play McMorning 2.
Yeah, I get it. Absolutely. So how'd the game turn out? Any other highlights? What was the score at the end?
It was a draw because I couldn't really get anything through because, he's just dominating me on the cards. Like he always was just beating anything I could do. But I did manage to stop him from scoring most of the points. I think the biggest thing that my biggest takeaway was that Stuck's bonus action, Astronomical Insignificance, is amazing. It definitely stopped him from scoring at least 2 victory points. It's so good. But, I had to cheat 13s and red jokers to make it go off.
That is funny.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it was a pretty cool game, and you got to experience the Koji draw engine, which dirtled a lot. And
I was really glad that I got to experience it, and experience it from someone who, like, I've played other people with Shenlong, and my experience in the past has been, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know if you're cheating. You're
No,
just
John
saying
is not
things.
cheating. No,
No, no,
John is
I know. No,
John
I'm
is
not talking.
about
I'm
as
saying
methodical. Yeah. No, I get your
no.
saying.
I'm saying John, like the way he plays it with his markers and everything. Like I felt very confident that like I was having a fair game. Where in the past when I played Shenlong, I'm like, wait, are you sure you have chi? You know, like stuff like that. But like he's super clean about it, so it was a great experience.
That man has
John's
probably piloted Shenlong 100+ times.
Right.
John Goldborn is a legend and a true gentleman, and there's a reason that he was one of the winners of the Best Sport Award during the following day's event. But that said, we'll move on to Doug. And Doug, before I let you go, I actually just realized I never actually read off what the pool was. I just said what I took.
Yeah,
sure. So, Table 1 was Covert Op and Corner. Table 2 was Cursed Objects and Standard. And then the scheme pool for both tables was In Your Face, Hidden Martyrs, Sabotage, Breakthrough, and Spread Them Out. So, with that said, Doug, take us away, sir.
Yeah, sure. So, I had actually been... this was an event that I'd been practicing for Sam and I actually had both been practicing as a buddy duo for like probably about 5 months, honestly. We were really excited for this event. So we went into it with a game plan. Basically, we were looking at the Madness of Malifaux books, and we were saying, what do we think that we can both pilot almost as efficiently as possible, because we're assumedly going against really good competition. And then I was really excited doubly because, Jesse, this was my first ever competitive Malifaux tournament a year ago.
Yeah.
And that was when I was with Sam. So this was like a good measuring mark for me too, because I've now been in competitive Malifaux for effectively a full year. So our plan was basically I was going to declare guild, Sam was going to declare ES, and I was effectively just going to solo Tull. Now I have some learnings from that we'll talk about on other parts of this episode. But for now, also the other thing Sam was planning on doing was planning on soloing Tiri, because Sam had played a whole ton of Tiri. He'd played probably like 10 or so games with Tiri on the digital online Vassal World Series leagues and the other leagues that he was in with like Landon, like Pope DARPA and stuff. And he was so he was really comfortable with that. So I had looked at the pools and I was like, Sam, let me play Cursed Objects, because Tull on Cursed Objects is really easy to pilot. He stays alive forever. He does a lot of damage at range. He's a good master. So our plan going into round 1 was I'm going to play Cursed Objects no matter what, no matter who's declaring into it. That's my plan. Sam's going to figure it out on the other side. So
sweet child.
So we get the round draw, and the round draw comes Landon and fucking Andre Demings, and Andre's on Damien too. And of course that's the Cursed Objects Master. And so I looked at it, I looked at Sam, he looked at me, and he's like, are you sure? And I was like, let's fucking do it. And then so we did it. We did it. And so I had a plan, and I forgot one thing, which just totally fucked my entire plan over. I'll give the TLDR of the entire game, basically. I had made a defensive castle that I was planning on like easy squeezing out the sides of to get around to try to score Spread Them Out. And my plan was to bait Damien into me and then tank his turn 1 and then just kill him with the rest of my crew, basically. And then the board was such that I could have picked off fairly easily at range the Gammers that all had Cursey marks on them. And I also had a mage for flipping Spread Them Out. So my plan was to tank the first hit, lose 1 or 2 models, and then fight for top of activation and kill him because he was too committed. But I fucking forgot about Belleflower and the channel, because I had been playing against Damien lists that didn't include her because they all had Fraudsum, basically. And so it basically turn 1 goes, he gears up Damien, throws him in, does his thing, he blasts a bunch of damage, kills a bunch of shit, and then I do a bunch of damage back to him. We're fighting back for activation control, and then he's 17-inch aways. I've got your back, Damien, all the way back to the back of the board. And I was like, oh, dumb. Shit. I was like, I forgot about that one interaction. Oh, god damn it.
So she can, I got your back back through Loeth,
Yeah,
but
so
still pull to herself.
Yes, yeah, and then so I forgot about that interaction because I hadn't played a lot of the other lists. Just had Frodzim for the pass token control.
Right.
And Andre was like, "No, I like Bellaventine more for the utility," which makes sense because when I've talked to him before about like his theory on max one play, he's a very high level player. So when you have access to utility, I think it goes up in value in his mind, because when you give a high level player like that more options, they're able to come up with more interesting scenarios, I think, on average. And so I think that's why he favors a Bellaventine model like that, would be my take on it. But it fucking schmegled me, basically, because I lost like 2 or 3 models, and then he just leaned on me for value. And then at the end, I tried to fight to get an extra VP to help diff. It was going to be 4-2, but then I had 2 13s in my hand, and I just needed him to not have the red joker, and then he had the red joker to deny me basically what I needed.
Of course, he had the red joker. He's cycling 5 or 6 cards a turn.
Yeah, and it's not even like he's lucky. The thing is that like I don't even feel like Andre got lucky at all. I did get a little unlucky for 2 or 3 different black joker flips, but like nothing to write home about on the salt train. But the thing is that he didn't get spectacularly lucky. He just played his crew, and by virtue of playing his crew, drew 12 cards. Yeah. Right? If you draw 12 cards plus your opener, that's 22-ish, 3-ish, plus other trigger abilities that you're seeing. I mean, you're seeing, plus some minor flips, you're seeing half your deck. Odds on, you're probably going to stumble across the red joker at some point. And he did. He had it like on 3 of the turns, right? So it's just hard when your crew is very good but also has card trajectory. Those card trajectory is just so powerful. It's such a force multiplier in this game.
So it's like if that Shenlong list had double blast, double injured, and a plus flip on everything.
yeah. But the TLDR of the game is basically, that happened. I forgot about the Bellaventine trigger. It schmegled me because he pulled it back, healed him back, and then threw him again. And then I just died. The end of the game was 4-1 Andre's favor. And then Sam lost to Landon. Landon was playing 10 Thunders. Sam was on Bayou. Sam was on ES.
Yeah,
Sam was on
Landon
ES.
was on Yoko 2, and Sam was on
Tieri
1. He lost
Tieri
74.
1. Yep. And he lost 74, and I lost 4-1. I was trying to keep it to 4-2, but that was our first round, basically.
So
and I was on call 1.
Can I tell you something, Doug?
Yeah.
So you should be proud, because while you did lose the game, that is the lowest score that Andre with Damien got all weekend in all of the games that he played. So
out of 8 games.
Out of 8 games, you kept him to only 4 VP. He did have 1 5 VP game, and then most of his other ones were like 6 7s or 8s.
I was playing super defensively. Yeah. It was, and I don't like playing scared, but I think in certain circumstances you kind of have to play trappy and scared to get good value.
Yeah, and Tull can kind of do that. I mean, he can hang back and then rain hell, so to speak.
Yeah, I just had a couple of black jokers on a couple heavy salvos that really mattered.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. All right, that was me.
Yeah, hey, that wraps up round 1. So, my team, we ended up getting a win and a draw. Doug's team got 2 losses, and we move on to round 2. So, Jake, why don't you start this one?
All right, so we played into Defective Dice, and I played into Tara. I think it was Tara 1.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't played against Tara in many, many years. So it was kind of new. Our buddy Jared used to play him all the time, so I was a little familiar with Tara, but not super familiar. And I went with Riva 2, who is probably the master I'm the most comfortable with. And we had, again, tried this game out. We had tested this out, and I like Riva into Carve, which might seem weird because, she wants to drop a lot of Pyre markers, and the Carve marker can blow those up, and that is definitely a consideration. But most of the benefit she gets out of a Pyre happens when it is dropped. So after it's dropped, it's kind of just bonus material. It's laying around, helping out, but it's not really a big deal if it gets blown up. The other thing that's really nice about Riva into Carve is that Lampads are very good at pushing the marker because they can push, they can move as a bonus, and then they can push again. So he he was not very familiar with how Riva 2 works, and he charged Talos into her. I kind of moved her up to the middle of the board, as I usually do, and he charged right in. So word of advice, if you're not familiar with Riva 2, she controls the middle of the board. Just leave her alone. Go away. Don't go near her unless you have some way to push her around. Because she can do a ridiculous amount of ping damage, like hit you for 1 over and over and over again, make you very sad. And that's exactly what she wants to do to something with armor 2. So Talos is just 7 wounds armor 2, so it dies really quickly. I think it died turn 1, might have been 2. Mm-hmm. So let me also say, I played 8 games of Malifaux. I might misremember some of this stuff. So, if you're like, that's not what happened, I'm sorry. Played 8 games. My brain was mush by Sunday. But he was also super gracious because he had a terrible card flip game. At one point, he black jokered Tara's ability that puts fast on my model, which prevented him from getting his buried stuff out. So it kind of held his buried stuff in reserve for an extra turn, which is really brutal. I would have, my plan was to kill the model if he had kill the model that he was trying to put fast on. But it was nice that I didn't have to. I mean, it was just a corpse candle, so I could resummon it, but it was nice that I didn't have to. But if Aeonis was buried, what's the other thing called? The big monster.
Nothing Beast?
Nothing Beast. Yeah. Nothing Beast was buried. Aeonis was buried. They both had to stay buried an extra turn because of that. And so I killed Talos really quick. I took Vendetta on his, what is it? It's a 7-point minion. Sorry. I don't know his crew.
Not me.
Is it the ethereal doggo? Is that the
it's the bigger version of the doggo, yeah.
Yeah.
So I took Vendetta on that, but then I ended up just spiking damage. I think I flipped into a moderate on a double negative or something silly. So I ended up just killing it turn 1 because I was like, you know what? This is going to give me such an advantage. It'll be worth missing 1 victory point. Which I feel like that's the problem with Vendetta. I feel like that happens all the time. But that allowed me to get a Lampad and a Druger into his back rank and kill all of his supporting models. And then I think I Red Joker to crit strike with Vincent on the Nothing Beast. So I just killed his crew really quickly. And as soon as Aeonis came up, he was in the middle near Riva, so he just got pinged down. Yeah, it was a rough game for him. A lot of it was due to card flips, like red jokering and, getting moderates on negative flips and stuff like that. But also, if you don't know how Riva works, she can be a real gotcha.
Oh, dude, if you don't know how Riva works, you can just get schmongled. Yeah. If somebody commits a threat into you, if they jam a big beater into you that doesn't have laugh off, thinking they're going to clog up the works or something like that, and you're just like, oh man, bless your heart.
She really loves that.
They just kind of die. They just.
And one of the things Jesse and I had talked about going into this tournament was, that I should play Riva because she's kind of a dark horse because no one really plays her. I mean, turns out I was the only Reser player all weekend, so no one played any Resers, but she's not one of the more common ones, so people just don't.
Yeah, if you don't know, I feel very, very strongly about this statement. So you can fight me about this, the internet. But if you're playing a game of Malifaux and you're in a competitive environment and you've never actually played a full rep or game against a particular master or keyword, it is going to be very hard for you to play optimally. And oftentimes, unless you're a particularly good player, you are going to get schmagled.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also kind of think that's part of the problem with the game of Malifaux. It prevents casual players from becoming competitive players without putting in a ton of research and reps.
Well, you have to do that with any competitive game. Malifaux is just simply a competitive game.
I think it's more extreme with Malifaux.
I think Jake might be right. We're gonna be a little foreshadowing for my round 3 game there, but we'll get back to that. I love you, Nate. All right.
Because to be honest with you, most of the games I played this weekend were against masters that I've played maybe once, and it was 2 years ago. And so I think what happens is it forces you to play more defensively because you're not really sure what to expect. And if you're sitting there reading all their cards every turn, then it's going to slow your game down too much in a tournament. But anyway, the end result was 6-4 to me. I took Hidden Martyrs and Vendetta. And it was Carve Path. I think I ended up with 3 on Carve, 2 on Hidden Martyrs, and 1 on Vendetta, but I could be wrong. And then he took Leave Your Mark and Secret Meetup. Unless you have special tech to deal with Reva, you don't take Leave Your Mark because she wants to sit in the middle. Which Jesse and I talked about, like she should take Leave Your Mark all the time because she's going to hold the middle.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I think that we forgot to mention. Did you have anything else to say on your game before we move on?
No, that's kind of it.
Okay, cool. So we forgot again to mention the pool. So table 1 was Guard the Stash Wedge. Table 2 was Carve a Path Flank, and then the scheme pool was Public Demo, Secret Meetup, Vendetta, Leave Your Mark, and Hidden Martyrs. And Jake's opponent was Kyle Barr, as I recall.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Doug, why don't we let you go, and then I'll do my game last.
For round 2?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So round 2, me and Sam. So again, Sam's on ES, I'm on Guild, and we've both kind of made the business decision to solo Masters. So Sam is locked into Tiri no matter what's happening, basically. And I'm pretty much locked into Tull no matter what's happening because it's the only crew I literally have with me. So we got paired against Malifaux University. And Malifaux University was on Neverborn, and he was playing Lord Chompy Bits as his primary master, and his son, who's really cool. I like his son; he's a cool kid. He was playing Bayou, so that's obviously a man of good taste, and he was playing Zip. The unfortunate thing for the Zip player was that Sam's favorite master in all of Malifaux for a little bit was Zip, so he knows that crew inside and out, like the back of his hand. And so Sam, I think, that scored 7-1 in that game when he was playing. And then basically the way our game went is this was Kick the Can 2.0, right? This is Kick the Can 2.0.
Carve a Path, yeah.
Yeah, I was on Carve a Path. I call it Kick the Can 2.0. And I took Rocketeers, which are insane because they have Onward and they're minions. So they qualify for not only being really good at the primary strat, but they're also really good at the scheme. We didn't, unfortunately, get a ton of turns in because I had a business client call me who's I had to take the call literally in the middle of the game. And John was a really nice guy about being chill about letting me take a 20-minute call in the middle of a literal tournament because it was just an important business client of mine. And then we got through turn 3, I guess. And effectively what happened is we were playing on a carnival map, and there was this giant Ferris wheel which split the lanes, and I had positioned myself so that my shooting bubble was looking across both lanes. And he took Lord Chompy Bits and Carver, and he Goku style yeeted them into my face. And he was deal with this or die. And so I sold out my entire turn 1 to use everything I had across my entire team to kill one of the little sacks. The little what are the little? They look like Oogie Boogies. What are they called?
Stitch Togethers.
Yeah, there was a Stitch Together and Lord Chompy Bits that were directly in my face, and I used every activation in my crew to basically kill the Stitch Together and hurt Chompy Bits a bunch. And then turn 2, I fought for the top of 2, killed Chompy Bits, And then the Rocketeers were just insanely good at the primary, so I just committed them to the flanks of the map, and they basically did most of my scoring and stuff for me. John did a good job of counterplaying, given that we only got 2 scoring turns in, and I think the game ended like 5-4 on my end. But it was if I think if Tull had gotten another 2 full turns of shooting, there would have been a couple of additional dead Neverborn folks there. But as was, he did a really good job. He kept it close. So.
Yeah, and huge props to John Lenti, because not only was he another one of the ties for our Best Sports Award on the End of Booty and Plunder, but he played Lord Chompy Bits as his leader every single round for all 8 rounds that he played all weekend. So, damn son, impressive.
Yeah, you got a chomp, dude.
Got a chomp.
I actually ran into there was a moment in the game where I almost lost because of Terrifying 12 and minions trying to spam attacks. Because, just so have folks know, a lot of the weight of damage from Tull Artillerist comes from Hexpo Archers spamming attacks into things. But because the way they function is they take 3 separate shots, I had to take 3 separate Terrifying 12s, which was, really annoying. And I had a string of like 4 failed AP in a row that I couldn't do anything about. And it was really, really, really close. So basically, Chompy Bits almost healed to full and then just killed my entire crew by himself. It was really spicy.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got my game. I played against Jeff from Defective Dice. And this was a hell of a game. Man, oh man. He ended up winning. He won the game 5-4. At the very end of turn 5, it was like last activation. I just didn't quite play my cards right to get a draw. He was playing Tony Ironsides 1 versus my Mayfang 2. And I feel pretty comfortable with Mayfang 2, but I had a couple of key sort of misplays throughout the course of the game. I gotta say, people don't really play Tony that much. I don't really see her being brought to tournaments. I don't see her name being bandied about on the internet, but I'll tell you what, I mean, Tony still has some significant play. Just the fact that she has a high stat Bring It with a punchy back trigger. I think people probably don't really respect Bring It the way that they should, because a lot of times it's basically like a lure, but it's giving you +2 move. So you end up moving 7 or even potentially like 8 inches, which is pretty wild, especially because she can just do it more than once. So she can really pull a model from like really, really, really far away right back into the jaws of death. And that's exactly what she did. Essentially, turn 1, I moved Mayfang up a little bit too close, not really respecting the Bring It. Jeff managed to knock Mayfang down to 2 wounds on turn 1 with no scrap markers nearby to protect her.
So what you're saying is Jeff indeed brought it.
Jeff indeed brought it. Thankfully, Jeff then Black Jokered the initiative turn 2 so that I won, and I activated with Mayfang, and then dropped a scrap marker next to her, and then rail walked her all the way back into my deployment zone. But the way that the activations played out, I didn't have the opportunity to go with Sparks first and then charge and swing twice on her to heal her 4. So he ended up breaking Tony out of the bubble, walked, used a Bring It to draw me closer to him, and then, I think he actually had to double walk, used Bring It to draw me in, and then did the punch back trigger to kill me, which was pretty saucy. One big mistake that I made was turn 2, I went early with the Metal Golem. And I did ride the rails, or not ride the rails, off the rails. Charged through a couple of models, took a swing, and I didn't really have a great control hand, but my Metal Golem was literally right in the middle of his entire crew. What I should have done was just use my last AP to vent steam, but instead I attacked, hit Howard Langston, and then between armor and shielded, I did 1 damage and didn't hit the vent steam trigger. So yeah. If I had been in the middle of his crew with a 50 mil model and a 30 or a 3-inch aura for hazardous, that would have drastically changed that entire game because basically none of his models had activated at that point. But it didn't do that, and the game did not go the way that it could have. So this was another game where we had some pretty swingy jokers, like lots of, I think, two activations in a row. Like I attacked, hit a red joker on the attack, black joker the damage, and then Jeff did the exact same thing on his activation, swinging back at me. Pretty wild, but he got a good clean win at 5-4. Jake got a 6-4 win, so that gave us a draw overall. And actually, one wild thing about this round, looking at Longshanks, is Doug's team is the only one that locked in a true win this round. Every single other team went 1-1, which was pretty wild. So I think we're moving on to round 3, are we not?
Jesse, do you mean it was pretty weird?
It was pretty weird. True story. So moving on to round 3. So round 3, table 1 was Carve a Path Corner, and table 2 was Cursed Object and Wedge. The scheme pool was Assassinate, Spread them out, Load them up, Set the Trap, and Breakthrough. So Doug, you played against Owen, I believe, of the Capital City crew.
Of the Capital City Goofballs. Those guys are awesome. I really like them. They're really good guys. Both Jeff and Owen are really.
The Wedge Cursed pool, I believe, right?
Yeah, I played into the Cursed pool against Owen, and he was on Von Schill, and his list was basically industry standard, old school Hannah and Arik super team handing out upgrades. And then I think he took a sniper, he took a flamethrower, he took a librarian. And I think that was his list. There might have been an upgrade on Arik, but I think that was his list, basically. He took a super team with some shooters and a bunch of healing. And then I took... So this is where I made basically a big mistake that I think I'm going to learn from moving forward. This was actually a learning experience for me, quite frankly. I looked at the board, and I looked at the scheme pool, and I was like, don't care, gonna play Tall Artillerist. That was my plan the whole time. Doesn't really matter what else happens. But the board was such that it was really not a good board for a shooting crew. Even though Tull was the thing I had practiced with, Tull 1 particularly, which is spam run and gun attacks and get value, was the thing I was ready to go with. It was not the right strategy for either the pool, nor the board, nor the opponent, quite frankly. And what I really should have done is gone with the thing that, quite frankly, I hadn't really gotten any reps into, but I was aware of. Tull 2 could have done a much better job in the particular scheme pool, basically. And we played a game, and I again had to play really defensive. He played really, really well. He played really cagey, where he moved up and was still able to score some of his secondaries. And we both kind of backed off from one another, and I was trying to funnel him in to make him come towards me and defend my deployment zone, which I was able to do for a really long time with Tull's fast action. And then you can stone to make it pulse remove markers. So I was fighting off him trying to score secondaries for most of the game with that. And then the game ended up 2-0 at the end of it. And I think the lesson that I learned is, even though I was uncomfortable with a particular thing, I should have tried it, because being proactive and playing for the win, playing to score, is so much better than playing scared or playing on the defensive. Even if you play perfect on the defensive, I was effectively playing for a tie in my scenario, where I should have taken the thing that I was a little less comfortable with and learned from an uncomfortable scenario. I could have scored a lot of those schemes with Tull and Louisa, basically.
Yeah, pretty wild to see a 2-0 table in third round. That must have been quite a game indeed.
We were basically playing cat and mouse. I was trying to force him into lanes to make him take actions. He was getting good value out of minimum actions. Then I was blowing things up with my fast action to counter it, and it kept going like that until the very end, where he was able to score a little bit more value on spread them out, and he was able to score 2 points.
Do you think you would have potentially been able to eke out some more points if you'd altered your scheme choices? Assassinate's just so damn hard on Shill, you know?
Yeah, I was trying to
and
bait
then
Shill.
Set the Trap is
I was trying to bait Shill. My thought is he was going to throw Shill in. He was going to throw Shill in to delete a model, and I was willing to bait Shill in to score the points on him. And I got really close, and he pulled a Schweisty move where he, out of activation, moved Hannah into block line of sight and just soak bullets because Shill was almost at. I got one full Hexbow activation into Shill, and I was like thunk 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 thunk, and then he was like, oh shit, I see what's happening, and then so he threw Hannah in between, and then he blocked the next Hexbow activation, basically. Smart. So he did a good job of countering that.
Doug, could you define Schweisty for me?
Schweisty is both swifty and feisty, but it's combined together. Much like, have you ever seen when those jars come with both peanut butter and jelly in them together?
Yes.
It's like
those
that.
Revolting things.
Yeah, it's like that with those two words.
Great. I can dig it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you had a rousing game.
It was good, and Owen's a really good guy. He was a good player. He was playing. I think it's an example of how Shill has a mega high ceiling because you can play him in so many different ways. He's such a versatile master. He's like he has tons of play lines, and when I think of other masters that I have more experience with, he's like a Ma Tucket. Like he can play into any pool. Like you could truly just take Shill and play him every round, probably.
Yeah, I've been, ever since 3E launched, and it really hasn't changed from, book to book to book, I honestly think that Shill is probably the best overall master in Outcasts, and honestly, probably one of the best overall masters in the game.
But you have to know exactly what the hell's going on. And he's a mini Rube Goldberg machine. You have to Rube Goldberg on top of playing. He's not overtly broken either. He got some real gasoline with what's her name? Yannick. He got some real gasoline with Yannick, but nothing like broken. Nothing like nothing that you look at and you're like, oh, what the fudge is going on here?
Yeah, his ceiling is so high. I mean, he's got a couple of really strong pieces of tech, like just being able to put a rocket launcher on Hannah and make it min 4, like trivially, is pretty friggin' legit.
Yeah, he's got really scary beater pieces, and he has diving charge on a master, which is insane. Diving charge on a master is wild.
Cool. Sounds like you had a pretty damn good game. And then it looks like Sam won his game with Tiri 1 versus Jeff's Nekama 2. Won that game 4-1, so you guys took the round. I'm sorry, it was a tied round. Tied round. My mistake.
It was 4. It was net diff 3-4.
Yeah.
So we would have won by 1, right?
Yeah, it was almost a perfect tied round. Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed. So that moves us on to me and Jake's game against the other coast. So Jake, I'm going to let you go ahead because, boy oh boy, did my game not go so well. I'll let you take the lead.
Cool. Speaking of masters with diving charge, I played against Jim, and he played Ma Tucket. I played Riva 2 again, and we were on the Carver Path table. So this was corner deployment Carver Path, which is tough because that's a long way to go. And we were on the table that ended up winning the Cartographer Award. So you can probably see pictures of it online and take a look and imagine trying to push carve markers around those fences. There was a big kind of L-shaped fence that made carve kind of forced us to put our markers right down the center, which was kind of cool because it was like a little road. I ended up putting one of mine way out on a flank, kind of knowing I wouldn't be able to get the second point because there was all severe terrain over there, but knowing that the first point was guaranteed. And he sent his right down the center of the board. But it was a really hard table to score that on, and we kind of knew going into it that we weren't going to score a lot of points on that. This was one of my favorite games. My two favorite games this weekend were this game and my game against Brandon, where we just tried to drop as many pyre markers as possible, which was fun. But Jim played Ma, and with the pool that was in this game, Ma was ridiculously good because Load 'em Up is one of those weird schemes where like some people can just kind of auto do it, and Ma with Bushwhackers can kind of just auto do it. So he had Spread Them Out and Load Them Up, which with 3 Bushwhackers on corner deployment with crazy amounts of terrain everywhere, like the game started and I said to him, "You've probably got Spread Them Out and Load Them Up, and I'm probably not going to stop you from scoring it."
That's what happened. Spoiler alert.
And like there was no way I was stopping him from scoring it. At least not the first point of each. I took Load 'em Up because I had Riva, and I took Assassinate. I thought it would be a little easier to kill Ma, so I, like usual, brought Riva right down the center. I actually tried to bait him out by sending a Druger up to to try to kill one of his test subjects, which didn't work. But I think he had 3 test subjects actually.
Wow!
I think he had 3 test subjects and 3 Bushwhackers and Bryn. Pretty sure that was his whole list. But I sent the Druger up to kind of like, draw Ma forward, which worked. But Jim kind of figured out the Riva trick pretty quick, and instead of charging Ma into Riva, he just stayed back and threw snakes at her.
Nice. Did he take any marker removal models like Gluttony or anything like that?
He didn't need to because we were doing Carve.
Okay, yeah.
Which actually, this was the game where that mechanic came into play the most, because we were kind of funneled into this little road in the middle of the table. He had to put his markers there. I had to put mine. Like there was just no way around it. Like the Carve markers were gonna blow up pyre markers every turn. There was one turn where it made a big difference. It would have killed if he hadn't done it. It would have killed Ma. Like as soon as she activated, she would have taken a burning and died. There were several times where I got really close to killing Ma. But ultimately, what ended up happening? Well, he had Bryn, so he kept. Bryn has an ability where he just gets rid of a condition completely.
Yeah.
So he kept kind of doing that. And then as soon as I declared Assassinate, he triple ran Ma to the back corner to keep her alive. Yeah.
Nice.
But I mean, at least she was out of my hair at that point. So I was able to push his markers back over the center line, and kind of control the center. But yeah, the other, he had a lot of good tricks that helped deal with Riva. Just by having test subjects, they can't be pushed, or they can, but they can choose to charge instead. So that was pretty huge, because if you can't push them, through the pyre markers and make them get burning and take damage. And then Bryn, of course, just getting rid of burning off of everyone, and 12 cups of coffee is always amazing as well.
Yeah, that sounds like it was a pretty good matchup.
It was a great game, yeah. And I think I said to you early on in that game, I said, "Hey, I'm going to lose this game," because I was kind of looking at the table, and I did not have a good position just because of the terrain and because he kind of controlled that center road with all of his test subjects. And sometimes I play better when I think I'm going to lose, though, because I'm basically just trying to not lose points at that point. So it ended up being a draw, a 5-5 draw, which I was quite proud of because I thought I was getting ruined. That and just knowing I couldn't stop his schemes on the flanks. There was just nothing I could do about it. So I ended up scoring the second point to Load Them Up just because I was sitting in the middle on a bunch of pyres. And I think he missed the second point because he had to hide Ma. It was either let me take a shot at killing her and try to score the second point to Load Them Up, or hide in the back corner. So I think he made the less dicey move there. Yeah, it was good though.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was a good game.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a phenomenal game. I have a deep and abiding love for Ma 1. If I had played Bayou, there's a very high likelihood I would have just soloed Ma 1 the whole event, just like Jim did. She's pretty fun and pretty awesome.
Yeah, he had a huge crew. I mean, 3 test subjects, 3 bushwhackers. Like they're all small models, but they are incredibly effective for like the amount of stones they cost.
Yeah, so. I mean, very rarely do you run into a crew where I mean, these days you don't even really see minions for the most part get hired super often. Like, obviously, you hire quite a number of them in your Reva crew, and there are some other crews that do. But to see a single minion hired, 3 times over, 2 different minions in the same crew is pretty wild. And
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he played 3 test subjects often, or if it was just because he was up against Reva and they were like a really good pick against her. But for the pool, for spread them out and load them up, I think 3 bushwhackers was the right call on that table. Yeah. On that table, there were so many areas that there was just no way I was going to get there.
Yeah,
I think that was the right call.
I'm such a bushwhacker apologist. Like 9 times out of 10 when I play Matak and I take 3 bushwhackers.
Yeah, they should probably be 7.
They're really, really good.
They're really good. Yeah.
So you ended up eking out a draw, which is great. I, on the other hand...
Oh, I'm sorry. He also had a Soulstone Miner. Sorry. Because at one point, I thought I was going to kill a bushwhacker until the Soulstone Miner like teleported across the table and just assisted it to take the burning off, which was annoying. Nice. But yeah, he had a Soulstone Miner.
My game did not go so well. You got a 5-5 draw. I suffered, I kid you not, the worst loss of my entire 3rd edition Malifaux career in this game. It was wild. So, you know how you were talking about having, played the game for a while, but still having masters that you've never really played against, quite a number of them, for that matter. So, that's what I got this round. When I saw that we had cursed objects in the pool, and that Nathan had declared Nelly, I said, well, somebody's going to have to play into Nelly on cursed objects, because there's no way that she's going into the other pool. And sure enough, that was me. I have never played against Nelly of any sort before. No Nelly 1, no Nelly 2, nothing. So my entire experience with her is strictly theorycraft. And that's really saying something, because I feel like we have had in the past a pretty diverse meta, and I've played kind of a lot of Vassal games.
We haven't had a lot of guild players in our meta. Yeah.
No, have not. So basically, the long and the short of it was that I lost this game 7-1, and my opponent never left his deployment zone. I had Misaki and a Toto with in his deployment zone turn 1, and I had 2 Thunder Archers sitting in the middle of a forest, raining down arrows on his crew, plus my other support models. Scored 1 point. It was pretty awesome. I obviously did not have a firm grasp of how exactly Nelly 1 works. I knew the trick with cursed objects, it was going to be tough to score on her. I didn't realize the amount of healing that the crew had, and I didn't respect the amount of discards that Nelly specifically would have to fuel the healing on the Guild Mage. So essentially what happened was turn 1 and turn 2, I dedicated a lot of resources to killing the printing press, because it was the model that was in my face and it was causing me a lot of problems. I did end up killing it, but if I had reallocated those resources and AP into killing the Guild Mage, it probably would have been a very different game. The amount of incidental healing that he got off of that stupid model was patently ridiculous. I also made the mistake. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's funny because I wanted to go into that game because I've played against Nelly a lot. I just, for some reason, always end up drawing her at tournaments. I end up playing against her at tournaments, and I've never lost a game against Nelly. Yeah. However, I have never played a game against Nelly with the Guild Mage, and I think that probably makes a huge difference. That probably gives her a huge buff.
Yeah, there are some other things that I could have done differently, like instead of just diving into his deployment zone and swinging on his crew turn 1 so that he didn't have to spend any AP moving up the field, I could have played cagey and I could have spread out a little bit because he only had a 6-model crew. The reason that he only had a 6-model crew is because he played Nelly 1 with Fiona, a Guild Mage, Allison Dade, and Lady J 2. He declared Lady J during Master Declaration as his second Master hire. I expected him in this matchup to go with Lady J 1, so I ended up taking the upgrade on both Atoto and Misaki. I played Misaki 1. I don't think I mentioned that. I took the upgrade on both of Atoto and Misaki that gives me Relentless so that I ignore enemies' resistance triggers, expecting that he was going to have Nelly 1 and I was going to have to deal with Riposte. He ended up taking Nelly 2, Lady J 2. So I ended up not really getting that much value at all out of those upgrades. I just essentially wasted 4 stones because they really didn't do anything for me. And then, so he had a 6-model crew, and what I really should have done is held back because I didn't have the advantage on hand size, velocity, drawing enough cards to make sure that I had the right high cards to get done when I needed to. I should have made him take a bunch of walk actions because he didn't have any shooting attacks, and peppered him with the Thunder Archers for basically the top of turn 2 while he got into position. Big mistake on my part. I just essentially jumped right into the middle of his trap, didn't prioritize the Guild Mage, and then I just got ground down as a result. When I say he didn't leave his deployment zone, I literally mean he didn't leave his deployment zone. It was wedge deployment, and I'm pretty sure that none of his models were outside of that at the end of the game. It was wild game. So I learned a lot. Now I know a little bit more about Nelly, and I know that she can interact to just heal too, because why not? So I had taken Assassinate, which was a very bad call into that pool. I had also taken Load 'em Up with Shadows, which was perfectly doable, but I lost Misaki too early, and then once you lose Misaki, the volume of shadow markers that you put out per turn really starts to decrease, and I wasn't going to be able to catch up at that point. So I scored 1 point for cursed objects, I believe, when I killed Fiona on turn 4.
So did he take Lady J just to counter Misaki?
I'm pretty sure he took Lady J just to counter Misaki, and that was one thing that I thought about after the game was when he declared Lady J as a second master, regardless of which version he took, I should have taken Misaki 2 instead of Misaki 1, because Lady J or any models that are able to attack buried models really dump on Misaki 1's playstyle. They take a lot of gas out of her tank, but Misaki 2 can still kind of work around that. That's really what I should have done. It's the same thing that I do if I play into Terra. There's no reason that I shouldn't have done it in this game, and I did not. So
that's a great example of there's a player he obviously knew how Misaki worked, and he knew that he's got this kind of in the back pocket really good counter,
Yeah, because realistically speaking, Lady J 2. I mean, maybe I'm misremembering the game, but she really didn't do very much that whole game. Did very little damage, dropped a couple of coffin markers that were kind of annoying, but weren't a 17 stone model or whatever it is.
No, she's not a great second master unless you're playing against someone who's burying. She's a lot of her abilities are wasted if she's a second master.
But she really warped the ability she really warped the way that I had to play my master, and for that it was probably worth the points.
Yep.
So big learning game for me. I had a great time. Nate was a great opponent. Even getting stomped that hard, I really did enjoy myself. So props to Nate for a great game. All right, so that concludes the tournament recap. One thing that I'd be interested in hearing from both of you, because I didn't play against any Madness of Malifaux models, nor did I bring any to the table, so I don't really have any in-game experience to share here. But Jake, why don't you start off, because I know that you brought Gwill a couple of times in this event, did you not?
Yeah, I did. So Gwill is the new henchman returned, I think it is. It's Neverborn can take it if you take caster, but it is a henchman for Rezzers. And it's really good. It's one of those henchmen that is probably undercosted and is going to be taken out of keyword all the time. Because it can pretty easily heal for 8 at 12 inches. It has to do damage to another model, but your Rezzers, go ahead, kill your other models. They'll just come back to life. I don't know if it's really greatly balanced. I foresee it going up a point so that it's currently 8, and I see it going up to 9 so that it's 10 out of keyword. It's really good. I'm going to play it all the time.
And you had kind of figured out like a cute combo with the Grave Golem, right? Which I
Yeah,
think is probably another kind of underplayed Rezzer model.
Well, it's one of those things where they did a good job in Malifaux Burns, and I think this is another good example of where Weird succeeds in making things that are old, that weren't played, bringing them back by making new things that work off of them, and the Grave Golem is one. So for those who don't know, because no one plays a Grave Golem, it's a 10-point enforcer. It's got a pretty good attack. Its main thing is that it has a demise ability that is not once per turn, where if it's killed, it buries, and then when it activates, it unburies on a corpse marker, and it dies if there's no corpse markers. So it's better in certain Rezzer matches because certain Rezzers just are more reliable about dropping corpses. But it heals 4 when it dies and buries, and then it regens 2 on its turn. So it's basically a health battery for the Gwill. The Gwill can hit it for 8 on turn 1 or turn 2, and you don't really care. And then every time it pops up, it takes its activation, and then when the Gwill goes, the Gwill just kills it. Just hits it for 4 and hits it for 2, healing other people. So and then burying it because there's no real downside. And it's kind of a neat combo too because the models like thematically kind of fit with each other. The Grave Golem is like a big pile of like grave earth, and the Gwill has like all this like growth on its back. They look kind of like thematically similar, which I think is neat. But I do think there's some play there. I think that's the best way to abuse it. But like I said, it only works for certain Rezzer masters that can really reliably drop corpses.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool combo, and it's one that I feel like, especially some opponents would have a very difficult time dealing with if they don't have the ability to pick up the corpse markers and make sure that the Grave Golem stays dead. Because for anybody who doesn't know, because you probably have never played against a Grave Golem, to Jake's point, like every time it dies, it just heals 4 and buries. There's no once per turn. You don't have to discard a card for it. It just kind of happens. And then if at the start of its activation there's no corpse markers on the table, it finally dies. But things like Riva and a few other Rezzer masters can just drop enough volume of corpse markers that's never going to happen, and you're always going to have a 10 stone 3/4/6 stat 6 attack. Now, realistically, that's pretty much all this model does is have like a 3/4/6 stat 6 attack. But when you combo it with Gwill, and you can just use that, like, what's it called? Like essence transfer? Is that what the ability is called? Yeah. To just siphon 4 damage off this thing onto something else and then bury this thing so that it pops up wherever it wants next activation. It's pretty freaking cool. It really is.
And the other crazy thing about it is, like, you can... And I did this in one game where, you activate like a little tiny minion, a corpse candle or something, and you hit the Grave Golem twice, get it down to 8 wounds. Then Gwill goes and essence transfers twice, and you kill your own Grave Golem turn 1, top of 1. And now all of a sudden, like any corpse markers that drop on the table, the Golem can just teleport across the whole table. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, that really warps the way that your opponent has to play turn 1, especially if they see that coming. Like, even if it's not really going to be that impactful, like the Grave Golem, like, unburies, charges, gets an attack at the end of the turn when your opponent still has a stacked hand and can just avoid it. It's still it alters the way that your opponent plays the game, which I really like, that psychological kind of mind game.
I don't think that combo is necessarily broken because if it's out of keyword, if it's not in returned, you're paying 19 stones. And I don't think you take it in returned because you can't drop enough corpse markers to reliably make sure the Grave Golem's going to come back. Not in Reser returned, at least you can't. So I don't think it's like a broken combo. It's a lot of points. There are definitely matchups, though, where your opponent is going to have no way to deal with it, which probably isn't really a healthy thing for the game, where it's like, oh, this is either just good or it's broken, right? Like, that's probably not like a good play experience if you're just not playing a crew that has a way to deal with it. And there's plenty of ways to deal with it. Like if you shut off demise abilities, if you stop it from healing, if you can cover up the corpse marker, you don't have to be able to destroy it. If you can just step on it with a 40 mil, then it doesn't have a way to unbury and base, So yeah, there's ways to deal with it, but not every crew is going to be able to be in the correct position or shut it down the healing or do whatever it needs to do. So it's situationally very good. The Gwill itself is probably just a little undercosted. And the other thing I played against is the Watchman. So I played against Brandon from Danger Planet, and he played Karis, and he took the Watchman henchman. What's his name?
Harrison Fordsham, I think.
Harrison Ford. Yeah, Harrison Ford and 2 Gearlings.
Yeah.
And I mean, I won't beat a dead horse. We all know the problem is the stupid pass tokens,
Yeah.
All of a sudden now you've given Arcanist a way to control activation. A super powerful faction with Karis, who's, big, I'm going to flame strike you for 5 at the end of the turn. Now all of a sudden she has a way to make sure she controls activation. And the funny thing is, that's kind of just like extra for them because they're awesome minions, 5-point minion with essentially 3 AP and a point of armor, and an 8-point henchman who like has a bunch of little tricks he can do, So they're pretty crazy. Yeah, that's my experience.
I would say, this is coming from the perspective of somebody who plays a lot of Misaki, who plays a lot of Ma 1, like, not Misaki, well, I guess Misaki now because Jin Bakara exists, but Misaki, Yoko, Ma 1, these are all masters that have had pass token generation available to them since essentially the start of the game, or at least since Malifaux Burns with Misaki 1. But pass token generation is a problem, especially when you can hire it into any crew in your faction. Like
a versatile 5-point minion. Yeah. That's a great scheme runner already.
It's too good. And like I get that that's one of the things that makes Yoko 2 so strong is that she starts every turn with 2 pass tokens just for coming to the table.
Yoko 2 is wildly nonsensical with the number of pass tokens that are produced.
Yoko 2 is pretty wild. I think that the issue with Yoko 2 is it's not that the number of pass tokens exists, it's that the pass tokens come for free at the start of turn 1. That's really the biggest issue. It's kind of the same thing that Ma Tucket does. You always want to shoot for your Rams on initiative turn 1 so that you can get your 2 pass tokens, and then you also have Ill Omens so that if you do... Ma Tucket is in a particularly interesting spot because you've got Ill Omens on Ma and Trixie if you take her, so even if you spend the 2 pass tokens that you've generated on turn 1 to guarantee last activation, you're probably also going to get first activation turn 2. Like, stuff like that is really problematic. I mean, they introduced pass tokens to the game as a balance mechanic to avoid the, get winning activation control that we saw as being a big problem in 2E. And, admittedly, they did add pass token generation at launch with Ma Tucket, who remains probably one of the best, or if not the best master in Bayou for that amongst many other reasons. But then they also added it to Yoko, who's had her struggles, up until Malifaux Burns.
Yeah,
I
but
feel like
adding
it's
it to
a
an entire
needs,
faction.
Yeah, like giving an entire faction the ability to generate those pass tokens is a real problem. Bayou has it to a lesser degree. Arcanist has it to a much greater degree now that the starter box models are in the game.
And the problem is most of the other
Go ahead.
Most of the other factions that have it, it's at least built into an attack action, right? So I forget what it's called, but there's a 6-inch attack that you can get a pass token if they haven't activated, and it's pretty common. It's on like a resin model. It's on some Bayou models, but at least the opponent has some sort of agency in that, right? They have an opportunity to stop it. But with these Arcanist models, it's just, for the Gearling, it's a low TN trigger on a tactical action. On a tactical action that is basically a walk, so you're going to do it anyway. So,
Yeah.
And then on Harrison Ford, it's just start a turn,
Yeah.
So there's no way to stop it.
Harrison Frodsham, just the passive pass token generation is an issue. With the Gearlings, at least, like, you need a 6 mask to do it, so you're not necessarily going to be able to guarantee that, but other than that, like, Harrison, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah.
I think that we need to, at this point, if I had to guess, we've probably got one more book release until we get a new edition of the game, like a 3.5 or something. I really don't feel like Weird can really push it much past that before they do some sort of a rules reset, because I feel like that's kind of where we stand right now. The majority of the issues that we have are rules or timing related, if they're not related to a powerful ability that Weird introduces on a new model set.
Yeah,
let's get away from the pass token generation thing. So that's it. Doug, I know you have a lot to say. So Doug, I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, I guess honestly, it's not a ton to say in terms of the amount I have to say. I think the biggest thing that's wrong right now is actually a very specific component of Damien's crew and a very specific component of Tiri's crew, and they're both kind of the same thing. So one of them is the ability to use Lawless Aura to guarantee a plus flip on a damage, as well as like a normal duel or whatever. You can do it on doing a normal duel, and then you can do it again when you get to damage to artificially inseminate a plus flip into that damage. And it materially changes the math on how you're able to defend against Damien's blast attack that can then do like blast and 4 damage, basically. And I think if they just change the wording from any flip to duels, I think that would be fine.
I mean, that's the reason that Euripides doesn't have like the ability to flip his use the old ways and flip cards off the top of the discard into damage flips.
And then the one other thing that it's also illustrative of, based on a bunch of the games that I've seen Sam play with Tiri, and how it snowballs way out of control with Tiri, is that you can very trivially give the matron either a single or oftentimes a double plus flip on damage with a stat 6 greatsword, and you can give the matron like 4 AP. So if the matron is a stat 6 greatsword with double plus on damage, and it's a greatsword, right? And it also has a pretty decent like Blade Rushy style trigger. You load that up, and regardless of what else is happening, by the nature of Tiri's crew specifically, very similar to Damien's crew, both of those crews passively will cantrip or draw between 7 to 10 cards during a turn, or at least look at and then select a statistically significant percentage of those cards to their hand. So when they go off with either Damien 2 if it's a beater, or in this case Tiri, or in this case it's the Iron Matron if you're playing as Tiri, or if you're playing against Tiri, when it goes off, those models have like 4 AP if you're the Matron, or like if you're Damien, they're coming in with blasts that are going to deal 4 damage on blast, with like stacking double injured, and because of the nature of how they're manipulating the plus and negative flips on damage, even if you have 13s in hand, you're not really going to be able to defend it. So I think that, and the other thing that this reminds me of fondly, I'll admit I'm a total psychopath and I loved it, was old school grandma before they nerfed her. Oh man, I loved her so much. Maxine 2 before they nerfed her. Yeah. So Maxine was able to manipulate damage flips with passive abilities in her crew, and it made for very non-interactive experiences where you could just oftentimes do math and point at a model and just decide that it was going to die if you had a decent enough hand. Because
so Doug,
she also stacked
very
injured.
Maxine.
The other thing that I hadn't really thought of, but that makes a lot of sense comparing those two new masters, the other thing that they both do, which is a big problem, is they have these associated costs, right? Like in order to get that plus flip on damage, you have to do a damage to Lilith, right? And in order to get fast on the Iron Matron, you need to do 2 damage to it, right? But they have these costs that aren't actually costs.
But Matron has armor.
Exactly. So Matron has armor and is going to also have shielded. So you're not actually paying a cost. There's not actually a cost. And then with Damien, you're doing 1 damage, but you're also hitting this trigger to heal Lilith. So again, there's not really a cost. And I think that what they do when they make these cards is they say like, oh, that's a really powerful ability. However, you're paying this cost. And if they miss the fact that like, well, due to these other rules interactions, the cost is non-existent. And I think that's kind of why Ophelia's crew was a problem for a while. It's like they were like, well, there's this downside, and it's like, well, but it's not really a downside because you have like the ability where you get a bonus on everything, right? And so I think it's a matter of just not looking at the card in full and just looking at the single ability and saying like, in a vacuum, this ability is balanced because there is this cost that's being paid. But in reality, when you put the whole crew on the table, it's not. It's just not there.
Yeah.
And I think that comes down to playtesting.
So the one thing I have, and Jesse and we have a conversation called Jesse and the Boys, misspelled because I have dyslexia, but I thought it was funny, so I kept it. It's called Jesse and the Boys, and in Jesse and the Boys, Jesse made a really good point about basically having subject matter experts devoted to handling the requisite crews, because sometimes you might have interactions that might be utterly clairvoyantly obvious to like a 10 Thunders player, because they know some of the core synergies for Masters because they played the faction for X number of years, versus somebody who maybe it's a Reser player or a Neverborn player and they're trying to test like Tull, but they don't really have a lot of experience playing with like the Pale Rider, for example, which is a staple. So like always be thinking about Pale Rider if you're testing a guild model. So like stuff like that happens, I think. And I think maybe we've seen that in some edge corner cases.
Oh wait, you mean they made a crew that has run and gun on everyone, and then they gave them a model that can make everyone charge and shoot?
or like the fact that like I think Damien is fine, other than the fact that you can push a button and get a plus flip on damage. That I think is a little nonsense, honestly. But like also,
I feel like there's a lot more wrong with Damien than that. But
there is. But yeah.
But
that's the biggest.
But that's like to me the biggest one. That's the thing that makes it so that it's hard to have play against it, right? If I were to play Damien 2 again, and I were to come up to him with a crew, I would plan on just scatter and run and try to score points, because Damien 2 invests a lot of AP into. It's a queen sized killing machine that comes at you, and it's invest everything into the queen model piece, move her up the board, kill everything off the board. But if your crew is able to scatter and score schemes and strat still, and giving him lots of these targets, sure, hunt down like one of my models, it's all the way over to here. By the time you get all the way over there, the other one, it'll be 2 turns later, and I'm not giving you blast targets. Don't give Damien 2 blast targets. It's not reasonable. Don't do it. If you're playing Damien 2, don't group up. I did it. It was not a good time. You will never have a good time. Don't group up.
But the other thing is, like, to your point about having the kind of experts for the factions, the problem with that though is that these people who are experts to a faction, like, they obviously love that faction, and we're all human. We're all going to, like, want more good things for our faction. It's hard to really not be biased. So I think that's the downside to being like, oh, we're going to let these, like, sort of faction specific playtesters really make the decisions. Is like, at the end of the day, like, you're giving them the power to make their own models better or worse. And can you really trust them to be like, my model's too good, make it worse for me,
Well, what I would propose is this. I would say you have people that are in the playtest program, right? Maybe it's one person per faction or something, right? Or if we're lucky, maybe two. And they'll be like, listen, you are intended to be able to get your hands on mostly the content around the faction you're a subject matter expert in. We're going to take your feedback, but we're also going to take feedback from the people that aren't subject matter experts, but we're going to weigh specific interactions. If you can find them, please find them for us if you're particularly familiar with stuff. And then you still take an aggregate of the feedback pool. You're not like, you don't in isolation make them the person that gets to be the Swami of buffing stat 8 across the board. That's not what I'm saying. I agree with you. That would be awful. But what I would say is, hey, you're in the program, Mr. Subject Matter Expert, right? Like, let's say for some reason Molly got a version 3, and you're like, Maniacal Cackle, please look at this and just tell us if there's something that we don't understand that breaks the game. Like, that's why you're enlisting that type of subject matter expert, right? Rather than like, play it and let us know. Like, that's what I would think. That's how I have a take on that.
Yeah, I can dig that. I think my take on the whole, and this extends beyond Madness of Malifaux stuff, but I feel like probably the there's 3 big breaking points for a keyword or a crew, and this is something that a lot of Madness of Malifaux crews or models kind of break in one way or another. So the difference between a good and a great model, or a good and a great crew, is typically going to be one of 3 things. One of them is resource generation. Generally speaking, we're talking about cards. Most of the time. Occasionally, crews are going to generate soul stones. Some crews generate pass tokens, but we're talking resource generation, and I would split that out into pass tokens because they are a game-breaking or game-making effect. And then cards, because cards always make every single crew that you're playing better. If your crew has kind of like card draw velocity, where you can make sure that your hand is moderately good to stacked every turn, you're going to be in a much better position than another crew, even if they have equivalent or better rules for the majority of their models. The other thing that you really need to worry about is action efficiency. So that means how many equivalent AP are being generated by every AP that your master or model spends. So a big issue that I see with a lot of Madness of Malifaux stuff, and I'm just going to pick on Tiri because I played a couple of games against her, and that happens to be the model I'm looking at right now. So I'm looking at Tiri 1. We know that the Tiri 1 crew draws a lot of cards. Every time it declares a tome trigger, more or less, it's going to draw cards. So we're usually talking, anywhere between probably 6 and 10 cards a turn, maybe on the high side 12, but generally speaking, maybe 6 to 8 cards a turn, which is a lot. I have a lot of crews that I play that draw 0 cards a turn. They have great, powerful models. They have big, punchy effects. Misaki is a good example. I play a lot of her. Very, very heavy damage dealing crew, tons of mobility. I draw basically 0 cards. Tiri draws a lot. I look at an ability on Tiri 1 like Off the Path. We know that Off the Path is a great ability. My master is spending 1 AP on it. They are discarding 2 cards and drawing 2 cards most of the time. So we're talking a card cycle. That card cycle of 2 cards is equivalent to basically 1 AP. I'm also pushing a model 2 to 5, rarely are you going to see 6, but 2 to 5 inches. That's another AP, most of the time. Now I'm also hitting the burnout trigger, which is giving that model fast. In this particular case, because of the crew and the synergies like Jake was talking about, it says it takes 2 damage, it really takes no damage. So basically I'm turning 1 Tiri AP into 3 AP. Potentially 4, but realistically speaking, we'll say 3. I can do this multiple times a turn. So I've done Off the Path twice, I've used 2 AP on my master, I've generated 6. This is probably one of the reasons that Ivan 1, prior to his nerf, was kind of top of the heap. He was easily one of the best masters in the game, and it was the same thing. It was all about AP efficiency, and I talked about this with Cody a long while ago, where I had my master who was shooting a model 10 inches away. That's 1 AP, dealing damage. Great. I'm also summoning a model in base-to-base contact with that model. It's 10 inches away, and I can potentially summon onto the far side of the model. So now we're talking 2 or 3 AP worth of movement. Plus, if I'm hiring a Deva, it's getting an attack. Great. That's happening right away because it has made to kill. That's another AP. So basically, I'm summoning a model, which is 1 equivalent AP. I'm doing 2 to 3 moves, so that's 2 to 3 equivalent AP. I'm dealing 2, 3, 4 damage, so that's another AP. And the model I'm summoning is getting an attack, which is another AP. So 1 Ivan AP was equivalent to typically 4 to 6 regular AP. These are the things that you really need to look out for, because when you get to that volume of AP generation, it really tends to kind of break the game. And we got away from that a little bit when we nerfed Ivan, but now we have things like Tiri, and we have things like Tull, and a few others that are getting multiple effects off of one action taken from an individual model or master. And that's where things really start to snowball. That's my soapbox. I'm done. There was a lot of things to say. I'm putting my hands up in the air right now, but weird scale back on the multiple domino effect type AP generation stuff. That's all I got.
I guess the only other thing I would want to say is, I love this game and I want it to continue to grow, and I'd love to see a bigger player base. And I don't think that the sort of direction that they've chose to go with the amount of new releases that continue to come out, I don't think that is great for new players. I think a new player looks at this game and it's intimidating because there are so many things and it's so in depth, and I don't know what the answer is, because that's also the thing that makes the game interesting. But I imagine that if there's some way to track it, they're not seeing great growth numbers with new players. And I'm sure that there are smarter people out there in the community that have good ideas on how to fix that. I'm just going to be a podcaster, which means I complain without offering any constructive criticism. But I don't see it as a great sort of path forward to just keep releasing a book every year. I don't see that as sustainable.
No, I would tend to agree. I think that the model that Weird has adopted over the last however many years, with releasing a book every year at Gen Con, and then we have an entire year's worth of content that gets released at the same time, and then sometimes gets eroded before, not typically before release, but sometimes gets eroded within about a year. And then, it takes that entire amount of time for the meta to shake out. It makes it very difficult to get new players into the game every time we add these big, gigantic layers of content for them to sift through. I mean, to this day, there are still Malifaux Burns models and masters that I've never played against. And like I said before, I play not a ton, but a respectable amount of Malifaux. And even not having seen the entirety of Malifaux Burns, now I have the entirety of Madness of Malifaux to contend with all at once. I think that getting away from the book model might probably make sense, and getting into more individual releases spaced out through the year. I don't feel like every release has to be in a physical book. Like, there's no reason that the Harrison Frodsham and Harrison Frodsham and the Sayuri crew with Koji and all those other models needed to be in the book. there's no reason that they couldn't just get released on their own and then have the rules pop out in the app. I feel like the book model made a lot more sense when we didn't have an app to refer to for all the rules, but the landscape has changed, and we don't need to be slave to a book or physical cards anymore unless we absolutely need to for some logistical reason. So I feel like getting into more spaced out releases that aren't kind of teased or released all at one time is probably a better way forward.
I have a Pope DARPA sized spicy take for you, Jesse.
Go ahead.
You close it out for us, Doug.
All right. Well, so I get what you guys are saying. It's a lot of content to release, just kind of like holding the edge of a the edge of a fire hose, and then releasing it all at once. I actually think that that's awesome because they give you all of the rules all at once. So it gives you the entire snapshot of the injection of the meta all at once. Now, I have a single major issue with this process, and my biggest gripe is that they allow a full year between the release of this level of content and a course correction. My take on this is I love the fact that they give us a ton of content and that it just drops all at once and everyone gets their toys at the same time. I think that's cool, actually. And I'm willing to invest more to play. But what is frustrating for me is if you're releasing that level of content from the depth perspective, then no one's going to be perfect on that. There are going to be some big outliers. I would say in this book, there's maybe 2 or 3 outliers that I can think of. I can think of the interaction with the 10 Thunders henchmen, and I can think of the witness keyword, and I can think of the Tiri keyword as the biggest things that come to mind immediately for me. Also, maybe, Fraudsome, but like Jin Bakar has been around for a while, and that model's fucking crazy. And, he's still alive and has survived all the stuff. But my opinion is that they should release patch notes intermittently on maybe a quarterly cycle and address the biggest, most glaring problems as quickly as possible to re-equalize, so that we don't have the Koji or the witness or the fraudsome for a year. We only have it for 3 months, which is fine. You look at it, you figure out the cream of the crop of the nonsense, then you cut that out and fix it, and then everything else isn't quite as bad. That's how I would approach it.
Well, that concludes 2 hours of mansplaining Malifaux to each other.
Because we didn't get to it at the start of the podcast, and I always like to include this, let's just do some quick plugs, and then we'll close out. So, Doug, do you have anything that you'd like to share before we close out for today?
Yes. 2 things. One, we have a narrative league going on right now that we're doing in conjunction with Defective Dice. It's going to be 8 play sessions. We're just getting towards the end of play session number 1 now, which is we're going to be doing play session number 2. It's going to be flipping over on the 13th. And then we also have a series with Boring Conversation that is ongoing, where we do an update to our faction focus series that we did probably about, Jesse, 7-8 months ago at this point, where we just give a general overview from a very light lore perspective, how the keyword fits into the world of Malifaux, and then we give the general broad strokes of how we believe the master is meant to be played, and then some play suggestions and overviews on the different core components of how keywords would break out, basically. So
cool. Awesome. And I think we have, 2 more episodes that we have to record, so we should probably get on that.
We have recorded 4, we have published 1, and we are very soonly about to publish the 2nd. So there's a Cavalier keyword out already that Jesse and I did, and we're about to publish the story one. And then after that, we're probably going to publish the one on either Tiri or Angler.
Fantastic. Jake, how about you? Do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Sure. So if anyone out there is interested in actual play RPG games, I'm part of Nastygram RPG. I might be a little biased, but I think it's pretty awesome. We do a variety of systems. We've got over 100 episodes at this point. And if you listen to that, you might even occasionally hear me drop some Malifaux-inspired characters into the mix, which is always fun.
Heck yeah. I myself don't have a ton of plugs since CaptainCon has already come and gone. The one thing I would say is I'm going to say it right now, and I'm going to put it out to the masses, and if I don't follow through on it, you can all shame me. But I have decided that this year is going to be the year that I finally paint some models. I have been wargaming since 1997, and I have really never painted anything. And a lot of that comes down to just, I have very much so a perfectionist mindset, and I know that if I paint something and it's not up to whatever standards I've seen other people paint things to, I'm going to be disappointed. So I've just kind of avoided it for years and years and years. So one thing that I've been thinking about doing this year to kick myself into gear is actually streaming live painting sessions from somebody who is a absolute and complete and utter rookie, being me, so that I can kind of see my progress over the course of a year as I learn to paint using different techniques. I feel like that's maybe a little bit of a pipe dream. I don't know that it's actually going to happen, but long story short, if we get to next CaptainCon and I'm fielding models that are not painted, or bring a bunch of terrain to the table that is not prepped and ready and good to go, you can all make fun of me. So we're going to just leave it at that. Cross my fingers, get some support from some friends, and get some models painted. So
awesome. Looking forward to seeing some Clampets painted up.
Clampets are high on the list. So with all that said, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. As always, keep flipping cards and stay weird, folks. That said, Doug, tell us how your round 3 went.
He already did.
Did he? Did he do round 3?
Doug, you there?
Doug, did we lose Doug?
No, I'm here. I went first, dude. I was
you went first?
Game. Yeah.
Oh, that was your Von Show game. Yeah, okay, never mind.
I put myself on mute because my dog was barking because my friend came over. And so she was wiling out, so I put myself on mute.
So I put a little footnote in here, and we're going to let Jake go. So Jake, go ahead. Jake, why don't you tell us about your round 3?
I already did.
You did?
Are you drunk?
No. God damn it. No,
dude,
I'm not.
Bro.
My round 3 was against Jim.
Oh, yes. We just had a whole talk about that and how awesome Apothic 1 is.
You're cut off.
I'm cut off.
Whatever you're doing right now, Jesse, can I please have some of it?
No.
Whatever you're on, I would like some. Please mail it to me.
Jesus. That concludes our regularly scheduled matches. Now we just bitch about Damien for about an hour.
Yeah. Can you let me know when it's okay to start complaining?